Will she or won't she? Queensland Premier Anna Bligh won't rule out an early election after an extraordinary day in state politics. The Liberal National Party has a new leader, but he's only the interim choice until the man who says he's the party's best option can get into Parliament and take over the reins. The Queensland Parliament is sitting today. Let's go to political reporter Jessica van Vonderen in Brisbane. So, Jessica, the session in Parliament is underway. Have there been the expected fireworks?
They sure have, Ros. This morning started quite pleasantly. Jeff Seeney and Campbell Newman met for a cup of coffee in the city. Campbell Newman declared he was the boss of the party, but then of course couldn't come down to be in Parliament today for question time because he hasn't yet been pre-selected to a seat, let alone have won a seat to be in state Parliament, let alone then be in a position to be the leader of the LNP. But Jeff Seeney wasn't shying away from that issue when it came to question time. In fact, he embraced it front on, and he stood up in Parliament and said to the Premier, has your government ever been known as a can-do government, and have you ever been known as a can-do Premier? Now, that is a direct reference to Campbell Newman, who is known as Can-Do Campbell. The Premier retaliated, describing Jeff Seeney as an illegitimate leader. He's just holding the seat warm for Campbell Newman, and his only role really is here in Parliament to take really to cop the flak from the government, because they're not holding back. They're certainly making the most out of this situation today.
So is Anna Bligh likely to call an early election to take advantage of the situation?
Well, yesterday certainly she wasn't ruling anything in or anything out. It's a tricky one because the Premier has repeatedly said that 2011 is a rebuilding year for Queensland after the natural disasters and that it will not be an election year. Now she's not ruling it out. She's been asked about it again in Parliament this morning by Jeff Seeney, who stood up and said, "Bring it on, let's see if you're game," sort of goading her into it. But again, she hasn't ruled that prospect of an early election out.
But could that early election, if she does do that, backfire for Anna Bligh?
Well, as I say, because of those promises that she has repeatedly made about not going to an early election, from that perspective, it could backfire. She's arguing that these latest circumstances are not of her making, that it's the LNP who is bringing the Parliament into contempt, as she calls it. She says it's a farce, it's tearing up the rule book for the Westminster system. How the public will view that, if indeed it does happen, is another matter.
And what's history going to make of John Paul Langbroek and Lawrence Springborg, Jessica?
Well, Lawrence Springborg really is the architect of the Liberal National Party's merging here in Queensland, so he will always be remembered and I think be given credit for that. John Paul Langbroek may well be remembered as the highest polling opposition leader who's been forced to resign for months. He was leading in the preferred Premier stakes over Anna Bligh in the opinion polls, and yet there was this push for Campbell Newman to come into state politics to take the leadership, and so he quite graciously yesterday stood aside to make way for the wishes of the party.
And you mentioned public reaction there, Jessica. What are the people of Queensland making of all this?
It's been a pretty mixed response, Ros. Some people are describing it as a farce and a joke within the LNP to see all of this happening. Other people are saying that they'd support Campbell Newman. When Campbell Newman and Jeff Seeney were having their chat over a cup of coffee this morning, one gentleman actually stopped to shake Councillor Newman's hand and say, "Well done, I'll vote for you." But it's going to take some getting used to. This situation of having an interim leader and a leader who wants to be Premier but isn't in Parliament, that hasn't been tried here in Queensland politics before. This is uncharted territory, and it's going to take all of us, the media, the politicians and the public, some time, I guess, to get used to this situation.
Jessica, thank you.
Thanks, Ros.